Hi and welcome to Leitrim Daily. My name is Breifne Earley and you are listening to the sports preview show here on the podcast. Today's show is brought to you in association with localmedia.ie, an award-winning web development company based here in the Hive in Carrick-on-Shannon, brought to you by the same people who bring you Leitrim Daily each and every week on the podcast here. Today's show, we're going to be looking at the Connacht Senior Football Championship and the Smith Monumentals Intermediate Football Championship, which kick off in just 7 days' time in the county. One game on Friday night next weekend, with the other two competitions rolling through the weekend, and the fixtures fully available on leitrimgaa.ie for anyone who wants to keep abreast of those games. A few changes this year. We're going to be looking at home and away games rather than playing at neutral venues, which is a first for Leitrim Gaelic football in the championship. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, it's been brought around because of COVID. We're going to be talking about that and other COVID implications with both Seamus Gallagher and Brendan Guckian, who are going to be joining us on today's show to talk about each of the teams taking part in both of those competitions. First, we're going to turn our attention towards the senior grade, and I'm delighted to welcome Brendan Guckian back to the show.
Thanks very much, Breifne. Thanks for having me back.
No problem at all. Always a pleasure to have you. You are, of course, as I mentioned, the under-17 inter-county manager. Let's maybe start with that, because it's been a strange couple of months. You started off really well, and then this whole virus blew up. And so how has the last 3 or 4 months been?
Yeah, I think it's new ground for everybody. It sort of caught us all on the hop. Preparation was going really well up until about the 10th of March. And then obviously we had to follow protocol from the GAA, and we haven't got together as a group since. Their club championship is starting on Monday week, which is great in one way because they'll be getting lots of football. But in saying that, I think the county final, the Leitrim county final for the under-17s is fixed for, I think it's the 10th of September. So effectively you're only going to have them for a few weeks now. We haven't got actual dates for the inter-county championship, but you'd imagine you could be looking at maybe the third weekend in October. So, but I suppose the only thing about it is every other team is in the same boat, so you just have to make do as best you can. If
there's a young lad listening to this, maybe 15 or 16, who missed out on the earlier rounds of selections, will they get an opportunity to shine in this championship? Is it kind of a bit of a blessing maybe for one or two lads to get that crack again at catching your attention?
Absolutely. I think I said to you previously, like, we had up on 80 players that went for trials, which was a fantastic turnout. We could only pick a panel of 30, but we've always made it clear that it's very much an open panel. And, we definitely will be looking at guys in the championship, and it'll keep the lads that are already there, keep them on their toes. And I suppose my thing from a management point of view is that the guys that are on the panel, you would be looking for them to perform and stand out in their club championship. And if there's anybody else of note, then definitely they'll be getting a chance.
Is it nice from a manager's point of view to have that club championship before the county team comes together, to get that opportunity to see lads in competitive action? Because most years you don't have that advantage really as an inter-county underage manager.
Yeah, personally for me, I think it's great, and I think it'll prepare the lads very well. It's going to be a very competitive championship, and I'm delighted that the whole management team will get a good look at the lads. So yeah, it's great preparation.
Of course, you've also been in the senior hotspot as well, but if we look at your club activity with St Mary's over the years, you've been on the winning side as a player, you've been on the winning side as a coach as well.
At intermediate level, not at senior level, yeah.
In terms of what goes into a club championship campaign for the clubs that are kind of facing into that over the next week or 10 days as it starts?
Well, again, it's a very difficult time because you're trying to juggle and trying to get so much into the last number of weeks. Now, I would imagine every club in the county have been doing their own bit, maybe not collectively, but that their managers would have been directing them in their fitness levels, and even in relation to diet and sleep, the usual things that are nearly the norm now for club footballers. The last number of weeks, I would imagine challenge games would be a big focus. And there's no better way of getting guys fit than playing in challenge games. So it's probably, the old saying that it's better than 10 training sessions a challenge game. So I would believe that a lot of clubs are focusing on challenge games at the moment.
In terms of, I know we're hearing not rumours, but we're hearing stories about games happening left, right and centre across the county and beyond. I know teams travelling as far as Offaly and Longford, Westmeath to get games. I suppose with the context of the virus, is it safe to be travelling those kind of distances to play games, or should we be looking maybe just across the border into Cavan, Sligo or Scommon to play games?
Yeah, very hard for me to comment on that one, Breifne, as in relation to health and safety of what's best to do. I suppose at the moment the guidelines are there that you can travel with anywhere within the country, so I suppose going down to Offaly is probably no different than going over to Sligo or to Cavan, but I would imagine that every club is following the protocol and the instruction issued by GA headquarters.
Perfect. Let's take a look at the senior championship for a while. Obviously, a bit of a change this year. 2 groups of 5, down from 6 last year, with 4 teams going through to the quarterfinals. So really, it's kind of a sorting competition. There'll be 1 team eliminated at the group stage. So 8 of the 10 will still progress to the quarterfinals. But some interesting draws. 1 really tough group with your own St. Mary's in there. Let's start maybe looking at that group A. It's got Mohill, Fianna, St. Callian, St. Mary's Kiltard, Ballinamore, Shauna Heslands and Aughawillan in it. Some interesting ties in there with a lot of teams realistically looking for championship success this year.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this year's championship and as you say, the Group 1 in particular. So many interesting things about Group 1. I suppose the standout for me is obviously the first game, St. Mary's and Fianna. And Fianna this year being managed by Joe Flynn, who was last year's St. Mary's manager. I think St. Mary's are very fortunate in the manager they got in this year, in Dennis Connerton, who's fantastic track record behind him with both Longford Slashers and Longford County team. So for me, that's a really exciting game.
It's the first game up as well.
Yeah, obviously you have Ballinamore. Very, very unfortunate in last year's county final. The sending off of Donald Feely is still being debated. Should it, shouldn't have. I was at the game personally. I don't think it should have happened. Conor Dolan getting that free 5 minutes into injury time. But I suppose in that group, I would definitely fancy Ballinamore probably topping the group. Again, I suppose the home and away fixture will have a big bearing. Aughawillan at home are going to be extremely hard beaten. So my 4 out of that would be possibly Aughawillan playing Mohill, which is second and third, and then maybe we'll say Ballinamore playing St. Mary's. It's so hard to call. It's like Fianna have a really young team coming forward. So I think that's why the first game is going to be a massive, massive game.
You think that realistically that's where that decision is going to be made in that first game between Carrick and St. Mary's?
Yeah.
Carrick and Fianna, should I say?
I do. I think it's really going to... the 2 of them are probably... St. Mary's, again, have a very young team. They have a massive potential. A lot of last year's minor team coming forward. Is it a bit too soon for them yet? I'm not too sure. I would have... huge time for those young lads, and Fianna again, they have a young team, hungry team, so it'll be interesting. It will be interesting. Mohill and Aughawillan, 2 seasoned campaigners, so I don't think they'll have any issues in getting to the quarterfinal stages.
When we talk about Ballinamore, they came so close last year after years in the wilderness. It's been almost 30 years since they last lifted the Ellis Cup. Should they be looking at is anything less than a championship success for them this year a failure in terms of the resources that have seemed to have gone into the team, in terms of the focus that's been put in the entire community, not just within the GA club? Yeah,
well, I suppose it's Dominic Carrigan's second year in charge, and again, a very capable manager. There's massive talent within that Ballinamore squad. The 2 McGoverns, Matthew Murphy, young Tom Pryor coming into it, and They probably didn't play as well as they could have in the county final, and yet it was only the last kick of the ball that beat them. So, yeah, I would imagine their expectation is definitely to challenge for the county final again this year.
Let's take a look over at Group 2, which includes all the Gaels: Allen Gaels, Leitrim Gaels, Melvin Gaels, current champions Glencar, Manor Hamilton, and probably everyone's outsiders to some extent, Drumreilly, but they've surprised everybody in recent years. They certainly will relish the challenge of getting out of that group. How do you see those games going? Again,
just starting with Drumreilly, I think every year at their peril, teams write off Drumreilly, and they're just a fantastic club team. Their spirit and their will to win and their will to stay in the top tier division I really admire it. The problem I would see is that the the legs are getting that bit older. John McKeown, Declan Maxwell, they've been fantastic servants to Drumreilly. Will this be the year that will catch up with them? Possibly, but I wouldn't write them off. But you would imagine Manor will probably progress at their ease and probably top that table. My dark horse in this year in that group would be Allen Gales. I think this is one of the first years that Allen Gales haven't guys travelling abroad, which always was a problem in the past. And again, they have some great young talent. Leitrim Gales, deservedly won the intermediate final last year, and again, they have a great crop of young players. And I would imagine that they will reach the quarter-final stage again. Melvin Gales, I suppose, hit and miss again last year, beat St Mary's well in the quarter-final, but were, well beaten against Manor. But I would say on a given day, and again, the home and away advantage, I wouldn't like any team to be travelling down to Kinlaw to try and overtake Melvin Gales. So.
I think it's to Bundoran as well. It's not even just to Kinlaw. They've actually played to Bundoran. So in terms of that home and away, it's a brand new feature of the championship this year, something you probably never really experienced, albeit you did get to play in Carrick for a lot of the championship games at the later stages in your own playing career. How much of an impact will that be? Say the likes of opening day, Melvin Gales coming to Leitrim Village to play Leitrim Gales, because that could be a crunch game deciding maybe who's second or third or fourth in the group. How much of an advantage is that home advantage?
I think it's a massive advantage, and again, if you take Drumreilly, there's not too many teams have probably ever played championship football down in Drumreilly, and it's tight pitch and home crowd in on top of you, very, very difficult. Melvin Gales, obviously the same. If you're travelling that little bit further into Bundoran, it's sort of hard to get clubs players focused when you're travelling that far away, playing on a new ground. So anybody that travels to Drumreilly or to Bundoran, I think will find it very difficult. The majority of guys would have played in Drumshanbo on a championship day as it is. Even Leitrim Gales would have been used in the past, so I don't think it would be as much of a challenge. But I think Kinlaw or Melvin Gales and Drumreilly have a massive advantage for their home games.
Is that something you'd like to see continued, or do you think there's something special about neutrality in terms of how that kind of creates the atmosphere, that it's not quite a home game, but you're also not travelling as far?
I think, and credit to the County Board and the CCC for trying out this. Obviously, it's something new, and I think it will work very well, and it'll make it a bit more competitive and a bit more interesting, and I'm looking forward to it.
Cast an eye over, I know we won't go into depth on it, but cast an eye over the intermediate championship. Obviously 3 teams came down from senior last year, that being Aughawillan, Gortletra and Drumahare all dropped down. Drumahare, Aughawillan were well off the pace last year. Gortletra, most people would expect to be reasonably competitive at that level. Anaduff, Drumkeerin, Ballinamore were all competitive there. Esslin, for some reason, always seem to be very competitive no matter what grade they're in. How do you see that division going from an overall point of view? Yeah,
again, look at it. It's going to be very interesting. I suppose I watched Gortletra and Fina in the relegation, and Fina were without doubt better on the day, but Gortletra made it very difficult for them, and yet we're talking about Fina competing, and competing well in a senior championship. So I would say Gortletra are definitely hurting, being down playing intermediate football. They'll be a very proud club, so they'll be looking to return to the top tier as quick as possible. Again, watched Anaduff in the semi-final last year. I would have a lot of respect and time for Anaduff. Again, they've some good young footballers coming through, good manager in Carl Foley. They'll be very well prepared. So, they're going to be thereabouts. Drumkeerin again, probably disappointed with their own performance in the county final last year. They probably thought there was more in them. So, I think it's going to be a really tightly contested battle between the top 4 teams. Throw Ballinamore or Esslin into the mix there, and it's going to be very competitive. You're
obviously over the under-17s. None of your players can play in these competitions, so you're going to these games as a neutral, effectively, or as a supporter with a bit of a St Mary's twinge, obviously. Would the coronavirus, just to go back to that again, would that affect your decision to go to a game on a Saturday or Sunday over the coming weeks and months?
Definitely not for me. I sort of couldn't wait to get back and get out and even watch my own kids training, because it was definitely a void for me over the last couple of months. At the weekend, you'd be going to a junior game, to a senior game, to an underage game. It wouldn't really matter, to a ladies game. So I really missed it. Again, I suppose we've been very fortunate in Leitrim where, we probably got away lighter than other counties in relation to cases. So I would imagine everybody will do everything by the book in relation to social distancing, and just everybody will be happy to be outdoors and watching what they love, and that's Gaelic football being played within the county.
Well, listen, thank you so much for dropping into me and having a chat and giving us a bit of an insight into what's going on in the minds of the players and officials in each of these clubs over the coming weeks. It's been a pleasure, and of course, as soon as your 17s get back on the pitch as well, the very best of luck to you and your management team and the players involved in that squad later on in the year too, whenever that might be, late October. I know you mentioned earlier on. Thanks very much, Brennan.
Thanks as always, Breifne.
Now, I mentioned at the top of the programme that today's episode is brought to you by localmedia.ie. It is a new company based here in the Hive, brought to you by the same people behind Leitrim Daily, those 200 plus episodes you've been listening to over the last 12 months. It is, of course, focused on developing websites for companies in Leitrim and further afield, and specifically looking at the recent announcement of the trading online voucher, which will 90% fund any initiative to get Leitrim small and medium-sized businesses actively trading online. If you'd like to know more about how your company can avail of this service through the local enterprise office and how localmedia.ie and Leitrim Daily can help you with that, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Our contact email is info@localmedia.ie, and you can get more information as well as look at our portfolio of clients on localmedia.ie. I look forward to hearing from you if you or your business are interested in getting involved in that particular scheme to get your new website 90% funded. Please get in touch for more information. Anyway, let's get back to the show. Now, if we turn our attention to the Smith Monumentals Intermediate Football Championship this year in Leitrim, and I'm joined now to have a chat through how most of these teams are preparing, or as little as we can work out about how much these teams are preparing, by Seamus Gallagher himself of Drumkeerin, of course, beaten finalists a number of times over the last few years. We won't dwell on that too much, Seamus. Welcome back to the programme.
Yeah, thanks very much, Breifne, and sure, it's good to be back with football to look forward to.
How nice is that after a couple of months of uncertainty to be back talking about football, actual on-the-field stuff, rather than will it even happen?
I know, it's good as far as I'm concerned. It's for a long time we didn't know whether we'd have any football or not. For a time there, I was just wondering, will it be safe to play football on this? And it's so strange and so different. The dressing rooms have to be sanitised after each game, and I think players have their own bottles, water bottles. So many things for backroom teams and that to think about what to keep safe, really. But let's hope we get through it and that everybody comes through it safe and we get to a finale at the end of September. Absolutely.
Now, looking at the Intermediate Championship, let's start in your own team's group. That's from Kieran. They're drawn in Group 1 alongside Esslin, Ballinamore, Bornacoola and Aughawillan. Now, Drumkeerin go into this as the beaten finalists last year. Anaduff, of course, beaten in the semi-final. Ballinamore, you were their victors back in the semi-final last year as well. There's also a couple of teams dropped down from the senior grade, Drumkeerin, Gortletra and Aughawillan. Is there anyone else you see challenging for this championship? Because it looks like it really is an open race at intermediate level this year.
Yeah, I was giving it a few thoughts there before you rang me, and I thought, I think it's much more open than the senior championship. In the senior championship we always have, you can pop out 4 or 5 teams, and one of them is nearly guaranteed to win it. You look at these 10 teams here in the intermediate, and you say, on their day, any of the 10 of them could win it. I think there's very little between the 10 of them. We can't gauge the form they're going into. They're all going in, if you excuse the pun, they're all going in on a level playing field. But being no league, if there was a league, you'd say, well, such a one is doing well. They've won all their games. They should go well in the championship, etc. But you've none of that this year. You just have to wait and see maybe how the first round goes and the second round. But A tough group. I think our own team, Drumkeerin, is in a tough group there with, I think it's Ballinamore, Eshlin, Aughawillan and Ballinamore, isn't it?
That's
our
correct.
group. And, we've had some great battles with some of those teams, and we never seem to get separated from Ballinamore. I think we meet every year on the championship, and we got the better of them last year in the semi-finals. Tight game, as it always is. Aughawillan and Drumkeerin, always a tough game. And the same, Eshlin are, when you mention Eshlin, you mentioned the two Burns, and there'll be players there who'll have a job to match them two boys if they're on form. So Ballinamore again, some very good players. So a tough league there. I suppose the only good thing is that there's 4 teams out of the 5 is going to come through. So, who it will be, it's, you just can't answer that question yet, but it's going to be tough.
You mentioned the fact that there's no league form to read anything really into over the last few months. That a lot of teams are coming into this under the radar because of that. In terms of the teams, you are in the unfortunate situation, I suppose, of playing Eshlin in the first game. You're not really sure what to expect. You've mentioned the two Burns, and they will be vital to any Eshlin challenge. But the second round, you face Aughawillan, who are idle in Group 1. So essentially your first 2 games, you're kind of going in blind from a Drumkeerin point of view.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure. I suppose the other strange thing before we go on to that is the neutral venues are gone this year, and it's all home and away in the round robin. And that's going to be very interesting. It'll be interesting to see what crowds turn up as well, because I have spoken to people that, they're thinking twice about going to some of these matches because of the COVID-19. So, as I said, it'll be interesting to see what crowds turn up. But as I said, we're away to Eshlin in the first game. It's not a venue we've been in that often down through the last few years. And, Eshlin will be tough at home. And as you say, we'll go back in then. We have a home game, the second one. That's the advantage we have. But Aughawillan, as I said earlier, always a tough game with Drumkeerin and Aughawillan, never anything, only a few points between us. So, if you lose the first game and go into the second game needing to win it, that's, if you lose the first 2 games, you're in trouble. And as far as qualification is concerned. So, interesting times ahead there in that group.
To look at that group, though, if you had to call it, Seamus, obviously Drumkeerin, the heart will be saying top of the pile. Realistically, when you look at those 5 teams, who do you expect to be the 4 coming out of that? And maybe if you can give us a bit of an order in terms of how you think they're going to fare out over the first round of games. I know it's very difficult, but if we put a
I was going to say
neck on the block,
an awful lot there, Breifne, but anyhow. Look, Drumkeerin has a good championship record there. We just can't get over that final hurdle. I think we have lost 4 finals in the intermediate, and 3 of them was by 1 point. And last year, of course, we lost to Leitrim Gales. But we're always there or thereabouts, and I think we will come out of the group there. And I think Ballinamore is another team that will come out there. They got to the semi-final last year. Aughawillan, I think it's between Ballinamore and Eshlin, and maybe the winner of the Ballinamore-Eshlin game will be the 4th team to come through there.
Of course, that game doesn't happen until the second round of competition. So interesting to see how that develops. The other round, of course, the other group in this intermediate championship for 2020 has also got 5 teams in it. Anaduff and Carrigallen and Kiltubber there from last year. But Gortletra and St Patrick's Drumahare both have dropped into that division from the senior ranks at the end of last year. Drumahare probably very much out of their depth at senior last year. They'll be looking back to come back and bounce back at the first time of asking. Gortletra, always a powerhouse. They'll be pretty eager to kind of impress after a disappointing season last year. Kiltubber, disappointing season at intermediate, but really pushed on at junior last year, and I might be seeing some of those lads coming through as these young lads come through. They've also got Barry McQueenie, last year's minor player of the year, coming into that team for the first time. So there's really a fair competition on that group too as well, Seamus.
Oh yeah, it's a tough group as well, and you didn't mention it now, but position to finish in, of course, is vital. Because I presume it's the top team probably plays the 4th team. Is it?
It is, yeah. Declan Bohol confirmed that last week.
It's vital if you can get the top place. You may get one of the weaker teams in the other group, but that doesn't guarantee a win either. Tough group, as you mentioned there. You'd have to say, Gortletra and Drumahare came down last year from senior in this group, and it really was because of the new format. If the format had stayed the way it was, one of them at least would be still up there. So I think they're really coming down as senior clubs. Now, Drumahare did have it tough, but I think you have to look at Gortletra and Drumahare as 2 of the teams that will qualify from that group. Carrigallen, always, a steady team there, always hard to beat there. And Anaduff, of course, not that many years ago since Anaduff were playing senior championship football. They got to the semi-final of the intermediate last year, and they'll be looking to go a step or two further this year. As you said, Kilturbert didn't have a good year last year. Interesting to see how they will come into play this year. And again, you see, we don't know form or anything. So, again, a tough group. If I know you're going to ask me for me 4 choices, I think Kilturbert might be the team to lose out there. I'd go for Anaduff, Gortletzer, Drumkeerin and Carrigallen to get to the quarterfinals there.
In that order, Seamus?
No. I was just looking for. I had them written down.
You were looking for the easy out, weren't you?
I think Gortletzer probably will finish top. Maybe Anaduff, Carrigallen, Drumkeerin.
Okay, so interesting times ahead in that group as well.
Yeah.
If you had
don't go to the bookies now with that.
If you had to put your neck on the block for an ultimate winner of the championship, who do you think, again, in a bit of a vacuum, to be fair to you, who do you think are your bet for the championship this year?
Will there be anyone listening to me around Drumkeerin on this?
No, just a conversation with yourself and myself. Nobody listens at all, you're fine.
I'm only kidding. I think Gortletzer are the team to beat this year in the intermediate, and I think Drumkeerin will be thereabouts as well.
Okay, so that's our final prediction: is Gortletzer maybe to beat Drumkeerin in the final? Says you. Heart says Drumkeerin might get it, but the head is saying Gortletzer.
Well, of course, I'm just saying that those two teams could meet in the quarterfinal. You don't know, and then one of them is gone. So it's a long way. It's a long road for the final on the end of September. But just when you did ask me, that's the two teams I go for.
Okay, on a practical level, of course, you mentioned the home and away, and you mentioned having spoken to some people anecdotally that were having maybe reservations about going to games. I spoke to Brendan Guckian earlier in the programme, and he said absolutely categorically he's going to be at whatever game he can get to. He's just itching to get back to the sideline to watch a bit of football. Yourself and the people you're friendly with around Drumkeerin, you're saying that might not be the case for everybody. What's your experience with them?
I've spoken to one or two lads that just would be wary of just going to games and may not. That doesn't say that if the club gets into the latter stages, that they won't go then. But just like Brendan, I intend to be at every game that Drumkeerin is playing in, and if you can fit in any other game, I'd also be there. Now, from what I can gather, they're almost all at the same time, so you really will be able to go to one game on the Saturday evening. I think there's one game on next Friday night to start the intermediate championship. But apart from that, they all seem to be at the same time. So, look, it'd be good to get one game a weekend at this stage after a summer of no football.
Absolutely, yeah. So say all of us. They haven't made it easy for the likes of me trying to get to as many games as possible in a weekend, which, although I have to say I'm not kind of half looking forward to not being able to get to as many games as I would have got to all of last summer. But it will be interesting to see as the season progresses how the fixtures pan out and how those teams' results continue to go. Seamus, thank you so much for joining me and giving me a few minutes of your time to run us through the intermediate championship for the coming year. I'm sure we'll be chatting to you as the season progresses through the year.
No problem. Thanks, Breifne.
And that, folks, is all we have time for today. Thank you very much for listening. I know you're as excited as I am. It's 7 more days to the start of the Leitrim Senior and Intermediate Football Championships. Please get out and support your clubs where you can, bearing in mind all the advice you're going to get from COVID. Thank you very much to Brendan and to Seamus for their expertise as we went through the various grades of football in the championship this year. Next week, we will be looking in a little bit more detail at the actual fixtures coming up. We'll be hearing from some of the clubs, the coaches, the players involved, as well as a sneak preview of the Ladies Football Championship coming very soon to the podcast as well. Thank you very much for listening. I have been Breifne Earley. I will be back talking to you next week.